pain of infidelity. So it's not the pain of discovery. We're talking about the lasting pain of it. And so we're going to hit on some points there. And so when we come back, I'll kind of outline that for everybody. So don't go anywhere. So thank you for anybody who's been watching our podcast being filmed live, and for anybody who's listening to it on our podcast. As always, we encourage you to please give us a 5-star review. Check out the show notes so you can see different links and resources that we have. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, always please subscribe to our channel, ring the bell, so that you can be notified when we post new videos or we go live on something. I also have been trying to cut these into some shorts. Don't know how well that's working out. But we're going to talk about the lasting pain of infidelity today. So to kind of break it down for you guys, we're going to talk about just the question that we hear a lot in therapy from partners who have just been working for a period of time on recovery from the discovery of infidelity. Why does it hurt? Why is it still hurting? So we're going to address that question. We're going to talk about the role of grief and attachment, and then we're going to talk about the rebuilding process. Which really is kind of addressing the question or the idea that it's not going to hurt forever. Right. But I do think it kind of shocks people that it's still hurting. After a good period of time. Is that your experience?
Yes, too? I think that is. I think one of the reasons we chose to speak to this today is because that is a common question or even just feedback that we get. I can't believe it still feels this way. How long does this really take? Those are all really common questions.
Yeah. I think the hard thing as a therapist in addressing this with clients, and because, especially when clients first come in, they're already feeling overwhelmed by the crisis that they're in, and, one thing that we have to do is just really be mindful about how much we deliver in that first session. And sometimes it's like, you want to deliver the right amount. It's like, oh, this is going to, I think this is a person that can help me. But if you do too much, it's like it can basically overwhelm the system. And one of the things that sometimes is asked is like when people ask like, how long does it take? Because the answer to that is not very appealing to people that are going through it.
No, I always tell them it's like standing at the bottom of Mount Everest thinking I got to get all the way to the top.
Right. Yeah. In the grand scheme of things, it's not, it really isn't a long time, but it does. It's like, if you're starting I'm starting my freshman year of college. It seems like that diploma is just a long ways away. And then next thing you know, you're getting your diploma and you're like, wow, like it just seemed like yesterday I was starting my freshman year, So I try not to go into that, very much on the first sessions. Do you
No, but when people ask me directly, I'm going to give them an answer.
Yeah. What answer do you give?
1 to 3 years.
Oh, you just tell them outright. Carrie's just direct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course there's a huge difference between 1 year and 3 years.
Yeah.
So,
but as we know, it can be more.
It can be more. I think though, I work with couples, I work with individuals, I work with the people who have, stepped out of their relationship. I work with people who've been betrayed, but I probably work more with people who've experienced betrayal, right? And so I find that they're trying to create some kind of game plan in their head, right? They're trying to map this new territory. And so telling them a number, I think, is what's part of what they're looking for. And I think that also what you're speaking to today is that initial shock of, oh my gosh, what's happened? What do I do? Gathering information is part of managing the crisis. And so I think it's helpful.
Right.
But I think that what we're specifically speaking to today is after that initial crisis, we've established some structure, we've got a little bit of the territory mapped. Why does it still hurt, right?
Right.
And so that's also where there's that 1 to 3 years all of a sudden starts to seem like a lot of variability.
Yeah. So how do you offer some comfort in that, in like kind of if they start to experience maybe overwhelmed by that number, like what's your next move there to kind of offer comfort and hope there?
That 1 to 3 years includes all the stages of recovery. It's not this stage 1 of crisis, right? That includes the discovery, right? The process of grief and loss, the process of anger, the process of rebuilding, the process of, establishing a new normal, the process of hope and gratitude, right? That's all included in that.
So in other words, not 1 to 3 years of raw crisis.
Of feeling the way you feel right now in this moment. Absolutely. No.
Right.
And the other one is too, kind of to embrace, kind of if you're going to use a mindfulness metaphor, the river's moving, you may as well get in. Like time's going to pass.
Right.
Right. 1 to 3 years is going to pass. But if we start working, it'll be a different kind of 1 to 3 years.
Right. Right. Yeah. So I tell people when they bring that up, I usually don't I'm not as direct as you, and that probably doesn't surprise you.
No, it doesn't.
Right. So I usually just say something to the effect of that, the first year is the hardest. So to imply that, it's going to be longer than a year, the first year is the hardest because you have all the anniversary dates. So like it really does feel to a lot of people like some sort of death, the loss is that significant. So it's just like if you experienced a death in the family,
absolutely,
that first year is hard because it's like you're experiencing all these markers of life, all these rituals and events that are regular throughout a calendar year, and you're experiencing them for the first time without this person,
right?
Which hits on the question, how do I do life now without this person, right? That is what our brains have to figure out when we lose somebody, right? And that's, I would say, a large part of what grief is.
Yes, sure.
And so the same thing I think is happening when what I call like the collapse of the infrastructure of the relationship happens when infidelity is discovered. Everything is a first.
Yep.
Everything's a first, the first Christmas, the first Thanksgiving, those are really a couple of hard ones, but also like the New Year,
right?
For example, like
the first family birthday, the first wedding anniversary, whatever. Sure.
And so, which can trigger a plethora of difficult feelings, right?
Yes, sure.
Based upon the event and how it hits you. And then there's the anniversary of the day you discovered.
D-Day.
Right, which is often called D-Day, right?
Yeah.
And so, so I'll often say, like, so you're obviously, it's going to be a year at least, you got to get through that first year.
Yeah.
And then, from there, it's really it's to be determined by, the couple themselves, the injury itself, and the traumas of the couple from the past. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that's important. And it can vary, and you and I, we have seen people that couldn't make their relationship work after a discovery of something like porn addiction. And we've seen couples that have done the work and thrived as a couple when there's been multiple, like dozens of sexual partners involved. And so doing the betrayal trauma work is there's so much unpredictability in it, but we talk about that a lot, right? The name of the game is uncertainty.
That's right. That's actually what we're going for. That's the goal.
Right. It's learning how to navigate this world of uncertainty. So, okay. So that's kind of how, so we obviously have a couple different approaches on how, when people want to know the answer, but Carrie's right. Like the time frame is, I even hate saying it on the podcast.
I know.
It's more years than months.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one of the things that I think we probably say in different ways is that it's not 3 years of misery
Right.
or 4 years of misery.
Right.
Like that part should only be probably months.
Yeah.
But the pain, the tears are still there at various
Mm-hmm.
times. The angst and anxiety, depression, whatever, different uncomfortable feelings are there at various times.
Sure.
To varying degrees.
Yes.
But
sure.
I would say that misery, after a year of recovery work, I would even say before that, but let's just stick with a year here. You definitely shouldn't just be in utter misery.
Right.
Like
Right.
you were on the day you found out.
Sure. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think that there are, factors that influence, right? The depth and breadth of and the duration of pain. I think sometimes the extent of the betrayals is one of them. But so is, something that you mentioned earlier, what does this reflect about the attachment that was shattered in the relationship? Right.
Yeah.
And a healthy attachment is a blend of interdependence where we both lean and count on each other, and some separateness and independence. And for a lot of couples, they are very close, or they feel very connected or dependent on each other. And so to find out there's been a betrayal and it forces some separateness can feel very, very much like, as scary as death. I can't do this. I don't know how to
Right.
live any other way. Right. And that panic, that level of stress response, right, may mean that it's going to take some more work
Right.
to get someone back to what we would probably want to say it would be a regulated state.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So, right before or during our dialogue on this, putting this episode together, one of the questions I asked you, which I'm going to ask you again, is, which is something that's happened many times to both of us. Somebody, a partner who's been betrayed, sitting across from you, and they're, the year anniversary is coming up of D-Day, or they just had it, and they're sitting across from you, and they're perplexed by why after a year is this still hurting? Like, how would you answer that one? I mean, it's going to probably be different based upon what client, but what do you find yourself often saying?
I think that I kind of take it to the body, and that the body remembers, and the body needs to tell that story. And it's an acknowledgement of what you've lived. It's not a reflection of a failure. And I hope that if I've been fortunate enough to walk through work with this couple as they approach that year, that we've done enough awareness building to value, okay, what's on the calendar? I ask often, what's on the calendar? What's coming up? What do we need to plan for? Not just because I'm being a good cognitive behavioral therapist, right? And noticing times that you could have irrational thoughts, but because the body remembers, right? And sometimes people are coming out of such a trauma state that they've numbed out their body, right? And so I'm really inviting them to pay attention.
Right.
And this is something that I remember that I had a time in my life where a lot of bad things happened all in one season. And for years, I'd be like, why am I always sad in September? I'm always, it's getting dark. That's probably why. And it was, years later. And I was like, my body's sad because those sad things happened in September. And it was like a lightning bolt had hit me. And I'm a therapist, and I do this every day. Right. And it's a normal thing to not recognize it, perhaps. But what I hope we can help people do is value it, right? Not walk away from it, to just kind of put their arm around, your body's going to remember. And that's part of the healing journey.
Yeah. And how amazing is that?
I know.
That our bodies have a memory. Like every individual cell has a memory. I mean, and that is for our benefit. It just doesn't feel like it is during times like this.
No, it
right?
doesn't.
Because the way I always say it is there's a part of your brain that cares more, when it comes to survival, cares more about your safety than it does your comfort.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And so it's like the little kid inside of us is going, but it hurts. And that part of your brain is like, hey, I know it hurts, but, your safety is more important to me right now. So we're just I'm going to have to just let that be. It's a very good parent. That part of our brain.
That part.
It's like a
right.
dad.
We've
like,
got it.
Hey, we got to let it hurt.
Right. The
you know?
confident first. Confident
But
parent.
boy, for the person who's hurting, it doesn't,
No.
they want that pain to stop.
You bet.
And so we definitely can empathize with that. So some of it too, like kind of what you're talking about too, is like one is like there's some biological things that we're not going to bore you with too much on that, and the way attachment works. But one of the things that I think has happened in the way that this type of trauma works, and I talk to clients about this, is that we are talking about the collapse of an infrastructure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? So the rules that govern the relationship have collapsed, and a lot of times, I think most of us are guilty of this. I'm not saying everybody who enters into a committed relationship are guilty of this, but I do think most of us are, is that we tend to build what I call a house of cards infrastructure. So in other words, the rule system that governs the relationship, the rules are leaning on each other, and they depend, for one rule to hold, the other rule has to hold. And if one rule is challenged and it collapses, the whole thing collapses. So an example of that, usually these rules are a lot of always and nevers, and this is how it has to be, is supposed to, right? A lot of certainty, right? So here we are with the challenge of certainty versus uncertainty. And so, for example, when the thing that you thought would never happen to you happens,
right,
then it's like, what else
can happen?
What else did I miss?
Yeah.
And a partners, more than any client I've ever seen, I think they feel like such fools, and they're not. So if you're a partner listening to this, a partner who's been betrayed, you're not a fool. But it's such an abrupt collapse of the system that you just feel foolish that you operated in it. And this is where I often talk about contrast. Right. Which we like to mention. It's actually, you reminded me of this years ago, that it was our beloved professor that said that, right? Who was it?
Dave Fournier.
Yeah, I know you.
Yeah. He always, he was a science guy, right?
Yeah. I said beloved professor, like he is still with us, by the way.
Yeah, he's not gone. He's just not our professor
It's not our
anymore.
late beloved professor.
Right.
Yeah.
No. That's a good clarification.
But I would love to see
But
him again.
he said, and I don't even know if he meant this to be brilliant or if it was just one of those things that he said that was so crystal and helpful that I've made it something powerful.
Yeah.
But he said information is found in contrast. And the simplicity of that statement always helps me as a therapist, right?
Yeah.
And I think it is such a good director to explore when you're talking about healing from betrayal trauma, right? We used to, right? It's our first year. Yeah. Speaking of, it's D-Day, right? I'm contrasting what I was before this day. I'm contrasting what I was like the holiday when I didn't know. Yeah.
It's so foundational in what we do.
It is.
A metaphor I will often use with clients is I'm like, are you ever sitting in a room and the air conditioner shuts off? And then you're like, wow, it's quiet in here. Right? And I think there's a part of us that's a little troubled by the idea that I was sitting in that room and it was that loud and I didn't even notice. Are you kidding me? I don't think it hits us that overt, but I do think there's a level of kind of being troubled by this idea that I didn't even notice how loud it was in here. And then it got real quiet, right? I think that's contrast.
Yes.
Right? And so when that happens so abruptly, the air conditioner metaphor times 1,000, just so abruptly in a relationship when it comes to like infidelity, now your brain is going through everything.
Yes.
So anybody who has experienced betrayal trauma knows what I'm talking about. They are going through their Rolodex of memories, wondering, was this real? Was this real? Was this true? And and even though the focus in the beginning is on the person who cut them open,
Right.
but it's not just that person that they're dealing with trust issues with.
Right.
They're having trouble trust. Like, did so and so know? Did this person know?
Right.
Is this? And then like maybe a friend knew that. Well, now what about my other friends?
Mm-hmm.
You know, or you like maybe my parents didn't even want me marrying this person.
Right.
You know, and they never
Right.
told me. Like,
Right.
and then obviously it starts shifting back to self. It's like I don't even trust me anymore. You know, and it's just like I said, it's a complete collapse
The house of cards.
of of the infrastructure. And so a lot of the process that we start taking clients through is a rebuilding
Right.
phase of, and it takes a while because you definitely got to get through the first year
Yeah.
to experience all the kind of cultural phenomenon we go through,
Sure.
to know how that's going to resonate with you. And like, you know, do you want to do you want to keep certain traditions or
Right.
not?
Right.
Do you want to celebrate Valentine's Day?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you think, you know, it's just a government holiday and you just want people to spend money?
Government. It's not a government holiday.
Or it's not, is it?
No.
But how did this even happen?
It's a
You know, the government's
merchandising
behind
holiday, right? Yeah.
it. It's not a
Go
government
down.
holiday.
Okay. Well, I'm
Air
just saying
quotes.
nobody gets the banks aren't closed.
Right. No, but I meant like, you know,
Right.
like some conspiracy
It's
holiday.
social.
That's
I
what I
get
was
it.
getting
I
at.
get it. Yeah.
But it's like that's kind of that analyzation process where I talk about like everything's going under the microscope.
Yes.
Every rule, every memory, it's like, and they're basically in my mind like one of three things that's going to happen. The rule, the old principle or value will make the cut into your new world that you're charting. It won't make the cut at all, or it will make the cut with modifications to it. And but it's like I think the movie Inside Out really portrays this well, because do you remember when they're dragging sadness through the hallway of memories, and sadness is touching all these memories that are turning blue, right?
Yes.
These happy memories are now sad, right? And it's like your brain is like literally going through a Rolodex of
Right.
probably some that you don't even realize is happening.
Right. Right.
Thousands and thousands of memories, reevaluating, you know. I rambled, sorry. I do that sometimes.
Yeah, I know.
You're okay with it,
Yeah, I
right?
am. I'm listening. I am. But I think that the infrastructure piece is what we're wanting to kind of share, because it takes a long time to rebuild infrastructure, right? We've
Yeah.
all driven down highways. It takes forever, right?
Yeah.
So it takes a long time, because the parts that are being rebuilt aren't just the relationship. They're both individuals and the relationship.
Right.
And so if you think about it being, you know, a triple rebuild, I think it kind of helps to give a little bit more understanding about that original question: is why is this still hurting? Why is
Right.
this still hard?
Now, what would you say are some things that we know, that you know as a therapist, because we've done this for a while, you know, that you know is coming, that as when they're asking themselves that question, they're gonna, it's one thing for us to tell them the answer, but we know most of the time, like, you know, that is important to our
Yeah.
clients, and it does, I do believe, helps them to gain some understanding how we respond to that. But there are some things that people are finding out that they need to find out on their own.
Sure.
And so what type of things do you think, like, you know is coming down the pike for them when it comes to them answering their own question?
Of why does this hurt so bad?
Yeah, why is this still hurting after a year? Right? Because logically it doesn't make sense. So we've been doing a lot of recovery work. My partner is here. Like they clear, and let's just say this is one where their partner's been clearly remorseful, like and feels an immense amount of shame, and has been willing to do almost anything to make it better, or to do what needs to be done. But it still hurts. Why is that happening?
Yeah.
I think we know that there are some things they're about to find out about themselves that it's kind of hard to face.
I think it's the contrast to, again, right, that you're a different person now. And I don't think you can even discover how you're different until you've had to walk it for a little while.
Right.
Right. And so I used to, right,
Yeah.
before D-Day and after D-Day versions of self. And so when what I know is coming down the pike is reevaluating really everything
Yeah.
about who you are, what's important to you, what are your values.
Self-discovery stuff.
It's lots of self-discovery. Right. Gross. I just rather numb out, right? Let's just
Right.
watch a movie.
Yeah.
Let's read a book, right? Let's not do that. I don't want to do that. It is. It's painful. I think, I always joke with my clients that it's like, geez, I don't want to take a high-powered magnifying mirror to my face. Ugh,
Yeah.
I don't want to know that, right?
Right.
But that's really the process that if you do recovery work, that's what it is. It's
There's
a deep
lot
dive, right?
Absolutely.
As what's the Jennifer Schneider quote, right? We have to dive into the center of the wound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think that's Schneider. I think that is, can't remember her name. I'll find it though.
Okay. We'll get it correct.
Yeah. But, yes, you have to dive into the painful center of the wound.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the wound with the relationship, and it's really also the wound with self.
Right. And, the reality is that, in the beginning it makes sense, right? When somebody's cut you open, you have to deal with that particular injury, which is a gaping wound, right? And you have to deal with the person who caused that injury.
Right.
That is always priority one. But as healing starts to take place and as we call recovery starts to take place, and people are making progress in that, they're like, they start to pan out a little bit, and they're like, there's a lot of other injury here,
Right.
In this journey of self-discovery, as we call it.
Yeah.
It's like, and so like when people are actually able to really look at to the wound and around the wound,
Yes.
realizing like there might be some other things that are contributing to my pain.
And so what's really beautiful is that after you've done some work, so maybe you are a year in and when people start exploring that, I don't have to ask them questions like, tell me about your attachment history. I don't have to ask them, what's your relationship with your mother, your father, your first lover. It was where the brain just goes. And I get to do that thing of, wow, look how we started talking about your relationship and you started talking about your mother.
Right.
It's beautiful because it's the idea too, right?
Yeah.
That if we give it the space, the brain and body kind of know what it needs.
Yeah.
And it needs to go back to revisit some of those things.
I love those. I love the sessions. Like I always usually point it out whenever I catch it. And I think I catch them mostly is because it's hard not to, because it's contrast where our clients for the first time, they spend an entire session not talking about their partner at all. And I'll always point that out usually at the end of session. You realize that you didn't bring him or her up once,
right?
Right. And, but that kind of goes to your point of like that they're starting to explore these other things about themselves. And as much as as Carrie says, it's a beautiful thing because it's a painful thing.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And that also creates insult to injury too, because partners will often feel like that, well, he or she did this to me and now they're forcing me to deal with my, without, and I can't even do that on my own timing.
I know.
But which is a fair feeling to have. But the reality is nobody just willfully dives into their traumas, because like, it's not like, 30, 35 years old, we're like, you know what, I think it's time. I'm going to do this, and usually something happens to us and we just kind of have to.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Otherwise, why would you?
Otherwise, why would you? You're numb, you're fine, right?
Yeah,
Right. I know, but I think that often, if we're talking about people that are into recovery, I think that injustice feeling has worked itself into other ways too. I don't hear that as often at that point. And I often think that's because people are buying into healing and recovery and they are getting some of the relief, right? Because naming your feelings and telling the story and identifying the threads and of experiences or beliefs and talking that through in therapy or in group or in all the things, it changes. That's the whole reason we do it. It starts to change you and it feels good, right?
Right.
What is it? The idea that just naming your feelings cuts the intensity of them in half. It's, again, pretty impressive. And so the idea that, hey, we didn't talk about, him or her all session, or, oh, look how your brain went right to some early experiences in your life is just kind of, I guess, being guardrails for clients because they're buying into the work because they aren't at day one. Right. And this lasts a long time, but day one is not the same as day 364. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, I'm having trouble saying that word. Absolutely. Sorry.
There you go.
I mumbled that one.
Avoid it if you need to.
Do you have words that you just mumble sometimes? Sorry, I'm having a squirrel moment.
I know you are. Yeah, sure, but I can't think of any.
That's one for me. Absolutely. Like I have to.
Too many bees?
You know one thing it's how in our first sessions we do the whole spiel of confidentiality and how that works. And every time I get to the part where I'm like, the only reasons that I would legally have to break confidentiality is if you were a threat to yourself or others, if it was court ordered, or if you were a threat, or if there was suspicion of child abuse or neglect and elderly abuse or neglect. And every time I get to that elderly abuse or neglect, I mumble it. So unless there's child abuse or neglect or elderly abuse and neglect, I can't.
Your brain's done.
I have to lick my lips and kind of slow down and be like, or elderly abuse or neglect.
I just say it, child or elderly abuse or neglect. See,
oh yeah. See?
My love of efficiency. See? You just cut 6 words out.
Isn't mumbling kind of efficient to the mumbler?
But not to the listener. And we're here for people to listen.
Yeah. They've already checked out at that point anyways.
True. No, you're right. The eyes are glazed over and rightfully so. Yeah.
So when it comes to this lasting pain, the first thing just to let people know is yes, that's the way it's supposed to be. So you're not doing it wrong in that sense, or necessarily and hopefully if there was something your therapist was concerned about in that, they'd tell you.
Right.
But you're not doing it wrong. It's painful for a while. It won't be painful like that.
Right.
It won't. That intense raw crisis pain won't be there forever.
Right.
But it is likely a year down the road, you might be wondering, man, it still hurts. That part is still there. But let's talk about then, as there's a grief process, which is part of the journey of self-discovery that we were talking about. What is the way forward? And all we can really talk to mostly is about how we would take people forward, right? So.
Yeah. Well, I think after they've done some work, hopefully we've established some structures that are helping them balance attending to what's going on and doing what needs to be done, right? So that whole system of checking in with your feelings and still being able to put one foot in front of the other. Hopefully we've set some structure that increases more communication, self-awareness, and couple awareness. And so after a year-ish, the pain should feel different, right? The pain should feel different, not as acute, not as sharp, right? Maybe more sore or tender, still making those adjustments in how to manage. And so at that point, it's also about, let's really kind of talk about the depths of the trauma at a pace that you can handle, right? But we're not just trying to get through it. Now we're trying to explore it so you can feel it and so you can tell your story. And so that does look like individual therapy. That does look like couples therapy. That does look like reflective writing. That does look like spiritual exploration. That does look like understanding a baseline of what self-care looks like, exercise,
Right.
sleep, nutrition, sunlight, healthy, exchanges with others, and kind of continuing that path, right? A lot of us as therapists after a year, we're like, all right, are we ready to talk about trauma therapies, right? That's often when we're talking EMDR, more intense couples therapies, or
Right.
interventions that are really about targeting,
Right.
right? As we said, the center of the wound.
Yeah. And for people hearing Carrie say that, it might, you're hearing her rattle off a lot of things. But it is okay to pace yourself.
Absolutely.
It's important to pace yourself.
Yeah.
I would say at that. But also, too, remembering, like, it's one iron.
Oh, Josh.
I mumble again.
One iron in the fire at a time. There you go.
It's words that start with vowels.
That's what it is.
One iron.
Now you sound like such an okie. Okay.
You say it again for people to hear.
One iron in the fire at a time.
Right. So.
Okay. One step at a time. One breath at a time. Whatever you need to hear.
Yeah, I like the hard consonant.
I know you do.
Yeah, one breath at a time. I like that.
Okay.
So, but just pacing yourself and not, not to rush the process, even though you'll probably be tempted to, because people do want the pain to stop.
Sure.
But I want to just give an example to illustrate to people like the implications of recovery, because what makes it hard and why there's resistance a lot of the times, because most people are, as part of their recovery process, is on a forgiveness journey, and this is regardless whether they stay together or not,
right?
Because
true.
As most of us know, true forgiveness is about the person forgiving. It's to the health benefit of the forgiver, not the one who, is being forgiven. So you're on that path anyways. But so I'm going to use an extreme example. So let's just say a person who has experienced a betrayal through infidelity. I guess this won't be extreme. It's actually quite common. Let's say that they grew up in a home where let's just say their dad, just kind of kind of go down the stereotype here. The dad, so wife's husband has cheated, and they grew up in a home where their dad had also cheated, and it affected their relationship, and they didn't have a very good opinion of him, and there's hard feelings, and he's a lot of expletives. I can't say that one either. And then I'm working at forgiving this other person that did this to me. Now, what does that mean about my dad? Or what does that do to that story and the narrative there? But it's not just narratives relating to infidelity. It will change narratives related to anybody that has wronged you or hurt you, or and then some people that you didn't think hurt you, you're wondering, well, maybe they were complicit in some pain, and it's just, it can be a little overwhelming, in that sense.
Yeah, I think that. And again, I think that doesn't get revealed until you're kind of shifted out some of that crisis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we do. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think the other element that I say to clients, and that we haven't said yet, but you just need time and repetition. So why does this take so long? Because it does. You just need some time and repetition, right? You just need time. Any change is required time and repetition. And that's a real bummer. But it's the only way through. And that's what we know about recovery, is that you have to just go through. You can't avoid, you can't go under, you can't go over. And so the idea that after you've given this some time and your brain and body are ready to say, boy, if I forgive my partner, do I also have to revisit forgiving my father?
Yeah.
That takes some time to get to that space, and it's okay.
And that happens more.
Right. So I guess part of what we're also inviting people to do here, Josh, is to be gentle with themselves.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
When you hear 1 to 3 years, and if it was me, I hear, I'll do it in 1, right?
Of course you do.
Oh, what?
No, Carrie would be like, no, I'm going to do it in 364 days.
Sure. Yeah. Well, absolutely, right? But you can't outwork time.
Right.
You just, effort is under your control, time is not. And part of this is about balance. Put in the effort, but also recognize the variable that isn't under your control, and that's time. And I think part of our job as therapists is to help, cheer on the effort and help clients to sit with the time.
Yeah, I agree. I think, we should do a follow-up episode to this and talk about different milestones that clients typically experience on this journey.
Okay.
Just so that when we're addressing this, the path forward, maybe to give people an idea of some of the things that we experience
Right.
with our clients that are common, that we talk about with our clients sometimes. And in that way, people can have at least a potential guide
A map.
a map to, oh yeah, that I was there, and
Right.
and a lot of times I'll even say the words to my clients like, oh, they'll come in and they're like disturbed or upset by something, and I'll reflect back to them where you're at is tracking,
Right. Exactly.
with how we understand progress and recovery.
Right.
And
Right.
one thing too, Dr. David Fournier would say is in mental health, progress looks like destruction in
Yeah.
the beginning, especially, which is like the mental health version of saying things get worse before they get better.
That's right. And I think also, just to give more literal and to wrap up, and I know we have this in our notes, but in the book Mending the Shattered Heart by Stephanie Carnes, she has a nice little graph that shows you the stages over time.
Yeah,
right.
that's
So
good. That's true.
so a lot of partners who are trying to create a map for how long is this going to suck,
Right.
right? And what's that going to look like? You can pull that little chart out, and people really like that.
Yes, and that book is actually, I pre-linked that one, so that one's already in the notes, because I figured it would come up.
It's a good one. It's very
along
helpful.
with Michelle Mays's Betrayal Bind. There's some good
She
resources out
normalizes
there.
time too
Yeah.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah, some great resources. One I didn't link yet, but I will, is our favorite, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes,
Because you brought up the
body.
the body and the memory and things like that.
Yeah.
So anyways, I mean, let's do a follow-up to
Yeah.
that. And
There's many ways to go with this,
Right.
right?
but I do think next week, I think it's Holly Shockley.
I
will
think
be-
it's Rebel, isn't
Oh, is it Rebel next week? I
Yeah,
can't
I
remember.
think we're doing EMDR after that. Yeah, or the next
No,
time.
Rebel will be eating disorders.
Oh.
Yeah, or
okay.
disorder. I think we're going to do disordered
Eating,
which is a little
okay.
different.
Okay.
But we got some cool guests
Yes,
coming
we do.
on,
We've got
and Holly's
exciting
topic is going to
conversations.
be pretty cool too, because she's going to want to talk about how to communicate with difficult people. Wasn't her exact words.
This is what you heard? Are you the difficult
I'm
person?
probably the difficult
Yeah,
person
maybe
to
so.
communicate with.
Squirrel. Can't say
Yeah,
vowel words.
I know.
Yeah.
Like, it's getting bad too.
Oh, boy. What are you going to be like when you're 65, Josh?
I just I just want to be fun. What are you talking about?
That will be fun. You have a good humor, a good spirit about it. That's true.
Why wouldn't it be
Yeah.
fun? Your squirrel moments don't ever annoy people. What are you talking about? I know. All right. Well, we appreciate everybody being with us and supporting our channel and our
Yeah.
podcast, and we hope you'll keep listening.
Thank you.